You're listening to Aviation Marketing Hangar Flying, the community for the best sales and marketing professionals in the aviation industry. You can't learn to fly just from a book. You learn from other pilots who know the tools, the skills, and the territory. Your hosts, John and Paula Williams, are your sales and marketing test pilots. They take the risks for you and share strategies, relevant examples, hacks, and how-tos. Be sure to subscribe on iTunes so you won't miss a thing.
This month, our book club discussion was Even a Geek Can Speak, which was a fairly easy book, you think, John?
Yeah, I mean, it might not have been too easy for a true geek. But for anybody that's done any talking in groups or so forth, it was a sort of pleasant reminder.
Right. But, given a lot of the speeches that I have heard in the aviation industry, I think this was not too far over the heads of the people involved. What do you think?
No, it's he hit all the salient points, because if you don't do this stuff, it isn't going to work.
Exactly. So very elementary, but I think very much needed. And part of the reason we chose this book was because in the aviation industry, we run into a lot of our clients and a lot of other people who are so involved with their product or service that they don't realize how specialized their knowledge or their information is, right?
Yes, they don't. And even though this may have been to you, and less so to me, elementary, it's good stuff to know, and it works. Because the whole idea is to simplify and be pointed.
Right. And, a lot of people are afraid to simplify because, they feel like this is their opportunity to really show their knowledge. But, I think we found that the more people simplify, the better they do with their sales presentations and with public speaking and everything else, right?
Yep, you bet.
All right. Okay, so let's dive in. First thing, the message objective. I think if people did just this one thing, and there's so many speeches that I've listened to, at the NBAA education sessions and, sales presentations and other kinds of things where they had no idea what their message objective was. They just start talking. And I think that's just crazy.
Yep, you got to simplify and point it to what's in it for the guy that's actually listening to you.
Exactly. And I think that's really the key point, is that if you figure out your message objective beforehand, it kind of forces you to put yourself in the other guy's shoes and say, here's the other guy's perspective, here's what he's interested in, and here's what I need to communicate, as opposed to just, here's what I want to say, which is a totally different thing. How do you do that? I know you do a lot of talking with folks, at least one-on-one. When you have to do this, do you write it out? Do you think it out? Do you at least spend a few minutes? Or what's your process, John?
I think it through.
You think it through?
I know what the topic is, and I know what I want them to get out of it, and so I just state that.
Right. That makes...
Everything else is just filler and trying to massage it in so they get that.
Exactly. And I think some of the outlines in the book for a message objective are pretty good exercises to think through. And I know this sounds so elementary, but there are so few people that actually do it. And it's so much more effective if you do. I think it's definitely worth taking 5 minutes or 10 minutes or 15 minutes ahead of any phone conversation or anything else just to do this.
Well, I'm going to say something that's going to really irritate some people, but people don't know how to think logically.
Mm-hmm.
Hold that thought when it comes to speaking.
Mm-hmm.
They can think logically when they're designing a program or coding a program or doing almost anything, but when it comes to relating a thought to another person, somehow the objectivity and the logic escapes a lot of people.
Yeah. I think sometimes that has to do with, either being nervous or concerned about sounding rehearsed. So, avoid thinking about the discussion until they're in the middle of it. And then all of a sudden they're, just kind of winging it and not doing a very good job.
Right.
Yeah. One thing, that's what part of the reason we put together a sales call checklist, which is kind of forces you to think through some of these things, which is basically a message objective. Here's what we want to talk with you about. Here's why, and here's how it's a benefit to you. And all that logic is kind of built into that checklist. So that's one way to do it on the phone.
Yes, it is.
All right. Cool. So next point in the book was there are dozens of reasons to limit your presentation to 3 points. I think this goes back to like 4th grade English composition, right? Where we used to do papers with an introduction, 3 points, and a conclusion.
Well, it goes beyond that. If you ever read anything on the power of 3.
Yeah. So
but 3 points is about all you're going to get across. And this says presentation, but you can get 3 bullets on each slide if you're good. You can talk to them and have that build into something if you have done it once or twice.
Right.
But no more than 3 bullets on a page. That's just crazy.
And I think really 3 main points to an entire presentation, because if you listen to like a lot of the TED Talks and other things, they really don't try to convey too much information, because if people can walk away knowing 3 things that they didn't know before that are useful, powerful, and helpful, that's 1,000 times better than coming away with 1,000 things that they're not going to remember and that aren't useful, powerful, or helpful, right?
True.
So, I like his...
But if you can have a presentation 60 slides long and have only 3 main points,
Yep.
but each slide cannot have more than 3 bullets, but you can have sub-issues all the way down through that.
Right.
That just support the 3 main points.
Exactly. That is absolutely true. And I think all 3 points have to support your message objective, or you're just shooting yourself in the foot and you really are making things too complicated. And we have never gone wrong with having a client simplify a presentation, whether that's a brochure or a presentation or a sales, a 1-hour sales PowerPoint or whatever form that takes, right?
Right.
Yeah, I think people tend to way overcomplicate things. The other thing I think is if you try for 2 or 1, people don't feel like they are quite convinced of whatever your message objective is. But 3 is a good number. And tell me why 3 is a good number. You said the power of 3. Is that something you've read, or?
That's a whole different discussion, but it's something that most people should read about. And this is back from the days of Michelangelo and all those other guys. They were big believers in the powers of 3, and you can see it in everything they've done.
Mm-hmm. True.
I'm not quite sure I recall why it's such a big deal, but it is.
Okay. It works. I guess you don't have to know how a cell phone works to use it, and you don't have to know how some of this stuff works in order to make it work for you. Okay, so what's your favorite hook technique?
If you can come across with a quick joke up front, I think I like that approach, because it wakes people up, makes them laugh, and then they start. That gives you about 7 seconds to sell the next line.
That's true. That is true. I actually like a story better. I think Paul Harvey had a fantastic hook. He would always tell the beginning of a story and then tell you all of this other stuff and then make you wait until the very end for the rest of the story. And I think what that does is number one, it captures your attention because people are kind of automatically wired to listen to stories. And the other thing is it promises something. If you stay through this entire hour, then I'm going to tell you the rest of the story. And then you'll understand. And then you put the pieces together. And people, in their thinking, they don't like open loops. And so they will stay until the end of even a very bad movie to see how it ends. And I think if you can open a loop at the beginning of a presentation and not close it until the very end, I think that's a great way to set the hook.
Cool.
Yeah. You like Paul Harvey, didn't you?
Oh, yes. I listened to him almost every day when I was growing up.
Right. Exactly. And then a lot of the TED Talks are, I'm going to say, following the same structure in the sense that you start with a surprising opening to a story, and then you don't tell them how you got to that point until the very end. And I think that's a real...
Well, what he did was he would tell you what you thought would be the entire story, because he made it sound like that was it.
Right.
And then after everything else was done in the last, minute of his broadcast, he would say, now for the rest of the story.
Right. Exactly. But he had the implied hook because that was the structure of his whole show. So you knew that was coming. So you had to stay till the end.
After the first time, yes, you knew.
Right. And you can do that, even in an educational presentation where you begin with, here I was in this situation, and then let me tell you how I got here. And then, tell the rest of the story throughout the presentation, and then end up by wrapping it up in a nice little package and making people feel really satisfied at the end when they know the whole thing.
There I was at flight level 320, total electrical failure, flying straight and level, no control over the flaps, no control over the engines.
When all of a sudden...
Right.
Right. And then, carry through with that story. And then you can tell them all the technical details and everything else, and then come back to wrapping up the story. I think that's great. But anyway, that's my favorite.
Anybody that's had a total electrical failure knows the implications of that.
Right. Not
so anyway,
a good day.
Especially if you're in the clouds on an approach. Been there, done that.
Absolutely. Okay. So that's a good hook. Let's see, the other thing he did say, and I think I totally agree with him, beginning with an introduction, this is who I am. Nobody cares who you are.
No, they don't. They already know that. That's why they're there to listen to you.
Yeah. If they're there for you, then of course, they already know who you are. If they're there for the topic, they don't care who you are. They care about the topic. So right. In either case, the introduction is either unnecessary or not helpful. So we can skip that whole thing and go to something much more interesting, like a story or a joke or whatever you think you can do.
And if you've been introducing, say, look at everybody and say, well, that takes care of the introduction.
Yep.
And go right on.
Exactly. By the end, they will either know who you are or
won't care.
Exactly. Okay. Visuals. Avoiding death by PowerPoint. I know the military is probably the worst offender, or the Department of Defense anyway, is the worst offender with this, because they do death by PowerPoint as almost is that a policy, or is it just the way everybody does everything?
It's not a policy, but I think people are afraid of saying something that is because you don't want questions in a military briefing.
Okay.
Because then you're not prepared for any possible question. You're supposed to be, but somebody's always going to ask something that, oh crap, I didn't think about that.
Yeah.
So rather than they read it, they read the thing. They have paragraphs on those things. I never did. Mm-hmm. And I got the occasional question, and I would have backup slides just in the event of that. But I tried to do it because I just want to stand up and scream about you idiots. You almost can't sit still when somebody's reading that stuff. Do you think I can't read?
Right. Well, and I guess part of the impetus to do that is because you want people to be able to print the slides and have everything in front of them and have everything super clear. But there's no point in doing a PowerPoint that way. You can always print handouts that have all of the facts and data and relevant stuff, no matter how technical a presentation gets. You don't have to put all that data on the slides because people can't absorb that from a screen. Whether it's a computer screen or on the wall, people's retention goes way down versus having a piece of paper in their hands. And that's just one of those things about people's brains.
Well, they print out the PowerPoints. They give a copy to everybody, and it goes. I mean, then they read it.
Oh man.
Yes, that's what I'm talking about.
See, yeah, and you can have printed as dense as you need to, and of course, some things do need to get complex and need to get technical, and that's fine. But you don't have to put all that data on the wall because people just can't absorb it that way. So you could put something simplified. If you have a chart or a graph, you only want to communicate one piece of data at a time with a chart or a graph. All of those things that we've talked about in our other podcasts. People remember pictures much better than they remember words. So if you can use pictures as opposed to words, that's much, much better.
Well, they do that on the other side, because I remember being in, let me just say I've been in high-level meetings where you have the 5 by 6 foot screens in the room, 3 of them.
Yeah.
One of them is live in some country, one of them is live in another country, one of them is live right here.
Right.
So you see what they're talking about as they're dodging ordnance or whatever. You can hear the stuff. You can see the aircraft. You can see the guys. You see all that stuff live.
Right.
That makes the guy that has to give the PowerPoint even smaller.
Yeah.
Especially if he does it wrong.
Right. Exactly.
Anyway, pictures, you just can't outdo those.
Right. And I think, part of the reason that PowerPoints are so bad in the aviation industry, or tend to be so bad, is because a lot of folks come from the military, and so that's where they learned how to do this, or they come from a very technical background, and, so that's where they learned how to do this. And then they try to do a sales presentation, and they try to do it the same way, and they find that they're losing people, and they don't know why, because they're giving them more data, and they think, well, what I need to do is just provide more data, and I will be more convincing. And that's the opposite is actually true. You're giving people way too much data to process, and you're really familiar with it, but other people are not. So
yeah, you need to summarize, and then if anybody's got a question, dive into that point. But aside from that, summaries are great.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. Think executive summary, not overload.
Yep.
And to the same point, jargon. I think
jargon is pretty bad. I mean, I worked in IT for a bunch of years, and I got to the point where I knew what the jargon meant, but I didn't know what. I mean, I knew what they were talking about, but I forgot what the letters stood for in words.
Right. Well, and aviation is full of jargon and acronyms and things like that, which is fine. But some of our customers, especially for charter organizations, flight schools, things like that, they are not insiders in the industry yet, the people that we're trying to sell to. So we really need to back off and very carefully consider all of the words that we're using, because we don't want to be losing people. They're not going to tell us they don't understand that word. They're not going to stop us and say, no, wait just a minute. What does that mean? They're just going to tune out. And I think a lot of salespeople throw in a lot of jargon because they want to sound like insiders.
They know what they're talking about.
Yeah. And they want to sound cool, and they want to use all of the, like in Top Gun, there's a lot of jargon in that movie. And, then everybody started talking like that for a while. And, which is fine, but it's not the most effective way to talk to people who are not in the industry, especially C-level executives and other folks. You have to remember, these folks have a lot more going on in their day and in their world than your specialized topic. So it's not dumbing things down to simplify. It's actually showing some respect for people for whom this is not their daily business. And that's why they try to make
respect for their intelligence and their time.
Yeah, exactly. That is absolutely right. So, jargon is usually a bad thing. And anytime you can simplify that, that's a good thing. Even people in the industry don't mind hearing the whole word as opposed to the acronym. I don't think that decreases your effectiveness even with insiders. And it sure as heck helps with people who are not insiders.
Well, there are, like ADSB, you need to say that once, but after that you don't want to say it again because it's just too long
Yeah,
for whatever you talk about.
that's true. Yeah, you want to explain what it is at the beginning of the presentation, especially if you're talking to people who are not familiar with it, and then refer to it as, safety standards or, whatever it is that you want to refer to it as. You don't necessarily need to be using that acronym over and over again. Okay, so the pause. This is one I'm not very good at.
And it's really easy. I mean, you can pause in a discussion,
Right.
and you will think that you must have paused for 5 minutes. You look like a fool.
Mm-hmm.
In reality, if you pause for more than about 3 seconds, it's surprising because your mind speeds up to accommodate, and you're used to speaking like I am at about 130 to 140 words a minute. You pause, and nobody thinks a big deal out of it except you.
Right. This is actually easier when you're in front of an audience. Then you can just wait until everybody looks up. And, so you've got instant reaction and instant gratification from a live audience. And you can see.
It was really driven home to me in business school because they made us do speeches in front of a TV camera and record everything and play it back to the class.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Right.
And I had so many pauses in there. And I thought, boy, am I going to look like an idiot? Well, nobody even noticed.
Right.
And I thought, really? Wow.
Time speeds up for you when you're speaking, but, so the pause really isn't that long, but I really like doing that in a live situation because then you can see the reaction and you know exactly what's going on. On the phone or on a GoToMeeting, it's a little harder because people don't know if they dropped or if it's time to jump in or, whatever the situation is. But in person, it's really, really effective. Okay. You look marvelous. Okay. You don't have to be a 10, you don't have to be Cary Grant or Marilyn Monroe in order to give an effective presentation. But it certainly can help if you are not distracting by, having crazy hair or, mismatched shoes or whatever, unless that's the impression that you want to give. But
you should dress for the audience.
Mm-hmm.
Unless you're trying to show what a fool you look like, and you do that.
Exactly. Well, and there's reasons to dress differently and to get attention. And I mean,
of course. Sure.
Steve Jobs had his turtleneck, his black turtleneck. Well, he always did product launches and things like that in a black turtleneck. And that was his thing, and everybody expected it, and it was very effective for him. So, but still, it was very simple, very clean, excuse me, kind of professional, casual-sided professional, but very simple, wanted to put the emphasis on the product that he was demonstrating. And I think we want to do the same thing. We want to put the emphasis on the message that we're speaking. So, if we are dressed in a way to kind of downplay, don't look at me, but listen to what I'm saying, I think that helps a lot.
There are some people who can really pull off different modes of dress. In business school, we had a lady come in.
Mm-hmm.
She was actually working as the marketing person. Harley Davidson hired her and to have specific things, and it was basically to go out and figure out what everybody knew and what everybody liked about bikes and how to be able to sell to everything from Hell's Angels up to the C-level people.
Right.
So she came in to give us a talk, and she came in, $1,500 suit, shoes, the epitome of the perfect executive dress.
Mm-hmm.
And she started to talk, and as she talked, she started taking off clothes. Everybody's going,
That got everybody's attention.
and I mean, she had it all figured out, and she took all of her clothes off, and then, well, I mean, not all of her clothes off, but she undressed to a point and dressed back up with some stuff she brought in, and when she finished, she looked like a biker chick that shouldn't have been in there. And she was still giving the presentation.
Mm-hmm.
And going through and explaining how she did what she did, and then she took those clothes off and put her executive suit back on to finish up the presentation. Most impressive.
Right.
So you could pull out if you to do that. I'm quite sure she did quite a bit of practice in front of a mirror.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah, that is something you wouldn't do unless the clothing was part of the point that you were making. And for her, it was, which was great.
Yep. But anyway.
Another person
you have to look. And you have to pause.
Another person that's really great at that is Lee Miltier. She talks about wardrobing or costuming as if she were a stage director, for just about everything she does. She's a speaker that does a number of different types of presentations. She does some for, very sophisticated business groups, and others for more new age kind of airy-fairy kind of groups and things like that. And she is very good at dressing for the point that she wants to make. And she actually explains this in one of the classes that we went to. She talks about how what you wear is 80% of what you're saying, or 80% of what people understand about the point that you're making. So, the visual communication is very important, and there's no such thing as dressing in a neutral way. Everything that you wear conveys a message of one kind or another. And so I thought that was a really great example of that as well.
Right. Next.
Okay. Schmoozing for geeks.
Yep.
I learned this as FORM, Family, Occupation, Recreation, and Mission. Joey Asher has kind of a different acronym, EIO. And what does EIO stand for?
Oh, I don't remember. I mean, basically, you just ask questions.
Right.
You just ask questions of whoever you're talking to and draw them out.
Exactly.
If FORM works for you, EIO works for this guy. You can get it down to what's your opinion. Everybody's got one of those.
Mm-hmm.
And,
Right, exactly. FORM, family, occupation, recreation, and mission. None of that is politics. None of that is religion. They're all safe topics, and it just gives you an easy way to remember. No matter what's going on in a networking event, I can always come up with a topic that is safe to talk about and easy to slide into. Because, if somebody's wearing a wedding ring, you can ask them, about their family. That's fairly simple. If somebody has a pin that's a lapel pin that's a specific, Rotary or Kiwanis or Lions or whatever, that's obviously a mission that they feel strongly about. Recreation, you can usually tell by if they're wearing a Harley Davidson watch or something along those lines. There's lots of clues that you can use. In one of our podcasts, we talked about being Sherlock Holmes. If you look at any individual human being, you can tell something about their family, occupation, recreation, or mission by looking at them. And then that's usually something that you can open a conversation with. Most people are wearing a conversation piece of some kind to a networking event. And you can do that too. You can wear a conversation piece that makes it easier for people to talk to you and it makes you more approachable.
And this one is, I think, EIO is actually experience, interest, and opinion.
Experience, interest, and opinion. Okay. Yeah, that's good too. So whichever is easier for you to remember, as long as you've got an acronym in your head, We were talking about acronyms that you take into a networking event. You never run out of things to talk about.
Nope.
Cool. All right, so next month we're actually talking about analytics. Exactly, because and next month is going to be a lot harder, so it'll be a nice balance. But thank you for joining us today. America needs the business. Great. We'll have a lovely afternoon, and we will see you next week.
Ciao.
Thanks for joining us for Aviation Marketing Hangar Flying, the best place to learn what really works in sales and marketing in the aviation industry. Remember to subscribe on iTunes and leave a rating.
You know you could.